There is a smoking prohibition in the complete area for the dry of woods and so on. We have very hot times here. Please don't smoke. My name is Eric, Papa Alpha 1 Echo Tango. I'm a radio amateur, I'm not a radio astronomer. So you will get mainly a radio background from the dish from me. Why is this disc built here? It's built here because it's Dwingelo. It was in the just behind World War II. They wanted to build this disc, and they were searching for an area where there was not much interference from anywhere. Not much noise, no air of eye, nothing at all. So they had a very disturbance-free area. That's why everybody's asked to put on the flight mode your telephone and don't use any wireless devices in this area. In 1931, Karl Jansky was one of the first people who found out that there was radiation from the cosmic. But he was an employee from Bell Telephone Laboratories, and he was working on international communications by radio. So when he found out that there were three purposes of noise, one were thunderstorms close by, one was thunderstorms far away, and one was something he couldn't explain for, he probably thought it might be some radiation from the cosmic. And he was right. After all, he was right. But his employer said, well, you are not paid for extraterrestrial signals, you are paid for transatlantic communications, just please stick to your job. And they were not interested in what he thought. So he was more or less ignored until Grote Reber in 1937. Grote Reber was an American radio ham operator. Does anyone know his call by any coincidence?
WAG.
I don't know, but something. Well, we'll look it up.
It's
no
in the
problem.
newsletter. There's a whole piece on him.
The former group didn't know either, so it's no problem. He believed him, and he built a 10-meter dish in his own garden from his own money, and he started to do observations to noise from the universe on 160 megahertz.
One interesting point, but Reber originally, his first intention was to bounce radio signals off the moon.
Okay.
That's a fact, and then
that's more or less from the same time that they tried that. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So he was, in fact, he noticed radiation from the universe, and in that case, he was one of the first radio astronomers. For the real astronomers weren't very interested in that time in radio signals from the universe. He made a publication in the Astrophysical Journal, and that went all over the world to all kinds of universities. And in the Netherlands there was Jan Hendrik Oort. He was a professor from the Leiden University for the astronomy department, and he was very interested, and he thought it must be possible to make a bigger dish and listen to the radiation from the universe, as they knew by then would be issued by the hydrogen line on some 1.2 gigahertz. So that's Grote Reber lived, I think, to 2002 by heart. And when he's cremated and his ashes are distributed over a few great radio telescopes in the world. One of it is this one, and when you take the last flagpole and you look at the rail and the foundation of the telescope, you will find a plaque where his ashes are mounted into the telescope. Just after the war, Van Oort, the professor from Leiden I just recalled, made a foundation, radiation from Sun and Milky Way. For he was quite convinced that there should be radiation from the Milky Way. And he made plans to build a big dish. And it was a cooperation between what we call the PTT, the Governmental Communication Board, as you have British Telecom or Belgacom or whatever, and every country has its own. The Philips Physics Laboratory. Philips was a big electronics firm in the Netherlands with great laboratories. And the astronomy departments from the universities of Leiden, Utrecht and Groningen. Groningen is quite nearby. At that time, we talk about 1945, they had the possibility to use a 7.5 meter dish at Kootwijk. And that was a Riesen, een Würzburg Riese. Würzburg was a German radar system from World War II, from the Atlantic Wall. They had the Wasserman, they had the Würzburg, they had the Freya, they had quite a few of those. And this was a 7.5 meter dish, the biggest one at that time. And it was situated at Kootwijk. Kootwijk was, you can still go there, It's in the middle of the country. Still the building of our old long-wave transmitters and short-wave transmitters for the communications with the Dutch Indies, as we had them formerly, was done there. And the dish was over there, and they started measuring on the hydrogen line. And they found quite interesting things about the galaxy, our own Milky Way, in fact. And at 11th of May 1951, Lex Muller, who was a radio technician and a radio astronomer, he succeeded in receiving on 21 centimeters the galactical radiation. So it was the first time they achieved that, and it was very special because you have to realize there were no solid state receivers or very high quality components. They did it with tubes. They had to cool that, and it was quite difficult to achieve that, and we'll talk about that later when I come to the telescope. The plans for the telescope went on, and Lex Muller was one of the most important pioneers on electronics for the telescope. It's built, as you can see, very sturdy. It was built by a firm who mainly built railroad bridges, railroads, traffic bridges, and so on. You can see that in rather heavy build. At 1956, 26th of April, our Queen commissioned the telescope. So from that time it was operational for the university. And in the 50s and 60s, it was those 2 decades, the Dwingelo telescope was one of the most important in Europe. Although 2.5 years later, Jodrell Bank came into action. So it was a divided position between those two. I don't know if they were more operational in that time, I can't recall. Maybe someone knows. But in the 60s, they built in Westerbork. You visited Westerbork, I think. The long row of 14 telescopes. Yep. They are 60 meter dishes. It's an array telescope, so it's quite a different principle of looking to the sky for radio radiation. I always compare it with pixels on a sensor and the camera. You take one pixel, or you take a complete row in one. You have a greater resolution. That's more or less the difference. And more later on, they started with LOFAR, the low frequency array, and the square kilometer array. LOFAR is spread all around Europe, working on much lower frequencies and looking to other signals than the hydrogen line. This means that in the 60s and the 90s, the telescope wasn't that important anymore. So it was coming into decay, and after all, at some moment the radio amateurs jumped in and tried to get move it again and use it. Why is that? Very obvious. It was working on 21 centimeters, and 23 centimeters is one of our things, 1.2 gigahertz. So it's quite nearby, and when you still look at the front end, you will see there is a big Horn feeder for 21 and 23 centimeters, used by whether the radio astronomist or the radio amateurs, whatever you like. In 2007, the telescope is an industrial monument since then, so there became money available to do a complete restoration. They did that, it took some 2 years. The complete dish was taken off. You can see 3 from the 4 stone pillars. The complete dish was rested there with a tent over it, and they completely renovated it, completely regazed it, and did everything on the supports were made new, and there was quite a lot of things done. And on 5 April of 2014, it was taken into action again by Joe Taylor. We know Joe Taylor from the GT protocols, so I've seen him. He was here. It was a very nice event, I can tell you. For the moment, you know all PA9 CEM as a moonbound station, and that's what's the main cause at this moment. We have a reflector of 25 meters. It's wire netting from 7.7 millimeters gap, and it will close it, make it suitable for frequencies to some 10 gigahertz. When you go up, it will let the radiations through, so it won't be very usable there. At least the gain will reduce quite. In former days there was just one pole in the middle. You can see a big knob in the middle in the center of the dish. It was just one pole with guy wires when the telescope was built. You can imagine when there was some wind blowing up, it was quite difficult to keep your focus. So it didn't take long before they made that a tripod, and some 20 years later they made it a quad, so to say. Well, now you see the focus box, and you might imagine how do you ever service that thing over there. Well, it's quite easy. You see a green tent over there. It's not a tent. When you take the sheet off, there's a lift under there, a telescopic lift, which lifts us up for 60 meters. We turn the telescope in the service position, as we call it. It will be straight up. It will be physically and technically locked. You can't move it. There's even a physical lock on the handle to secure it. And you go up by lift. If you don't secure the telescope, you can't move the lift. You move the lift yourself, you got on it, and the lift will end up exactly between the two poles, the lower poles, which carry the front end box. And the next thing is that it's a kind of a cubicle, apart from the thing that's sticking out. The front end of the cubicle you can loosen with some big bolts, and you can take out the complete front end. It's on rails. You can take out the complete front end, and the top of the lift, the cage on the top of the lift, has the same rails with an extension. You can clap out the extension to the top box, and you roll out a complete thing. For it's it's quite heavy. And you can take it down or do something up there whatever you like. You can disconnect the cables and you can take it wherever you like. We use the Muller house, that's the building over there. We have a small workshop there, and we can take it in there. And if you want, we can do some service over there. Build new frequencies in it, whatever. So that's how the front end is working. We have, as I told you, there is a horn in there for 21 and 23 centimeters. 23 centimeters is fed directly with the PA in the top, and the same for 70 centimeters in the white extension in the front end. There are, for horizontally and vertically, two dipoles connected, and we push up 70 centimeters, and there's a PA in there. It's made with 48 dB gain. It's quite a lot. Power is coming out of the dish. And when we go higher, we use 2 meters for the steering and transverters for the upper frequencies. The top box is movable in and out, as you can see, perhaps. There's a motor in it with this kind of gear, so we can refocus it. So if you build in a test horn antenna or a feeder, you might get out of exact focus. Not quite for the centralization, but in and out, you can correct that. You just push on the button and you call to the moon, and you can see what kind of signal you get back. And if you gain something, you've done it right, and if you lose something, you did it wrong. The telescope is azimuthal, is turning around at the elevation. You can turn it right 90 degrees straight up. You can turn it around for 540 degrees, 2 times 270. That's something from the astronomers, I don't know why, but in total it's 540 degrees around. Don't turn it too far, for you will lock them. You have quite a lot of work to release it again. It's all done electronically. You have a big axle in the middle where the cables come in, from ours to power cables, water and so on. And there are 2 pigeon wheels on a big wheel. And those pigeon wheels are on tension, so there is no gap in the turning of the gearbox. It's really it's very heavy oiled. It's very good work. Now that's where it is passed. Well, that's how it moves. It's all electronically done. You have seen it inside. There is just a console, and when you tell it to follow the moon, it will follow the moon as far as possible. When we do EME, we are allowed to do that when we have an elevation of 10 degrees, not below, because you are straight on the surface, and it's not good for people, animals, everything, whatever. You can follow anything you like when you have the Keplers. You can put Keplers from a satellite in it.